Before the video gets started, guys, my competition is live. Yes, if you guys want to go see The Invisible Man with me at a private preview screening, thanks to Universal Pictures, just go over to my Instagram. It's right here and enter the competition. Hey guys, my name is Emma and let's talk spooky stuff. So last month I did my personal favorite films from the last decade. I'll link the video here and you guys seem to really like it. I tried to do an interesting format where I included my personal favorite along with a hidden gems. So hopefully you got some good recommendations, and I found a lot of you guys in the comments really liked the recommendations that way. So I thought, why not go back and do the best of 2000 to 2009. Do let me know if you like this format and I'll do another one on the 90s. But let's jump straight in. 2000s, my personal favorite from 2000 has to be Blair Witch, The Book of Shadows. I feel like I'm lying if I say that this is just a joke, because it really is my dream. This is my ultimate guilty pleasure, but it's not my favorite for this year, don't worry. But I did find it really hard to pick between two films that I really like and I thought were very influential in the 2000s horror, slasher, teen genre, and the first one is Ginger Snaps. Starring Emily Perkins and Scream Queen Katharine Isabelle, this drama horror follows two morbid teenage sisters that must deal with tragic consequences when one of them is bitten by the werewolf. Such a great movie, and I felt like it's one that we break down and discuss to this day because there's so many layers to it, and I felt like it just did so much for the 2000s. But I had to put in here as well Scream 3. And I know it's not everyone's favorite, but my God, that haircut, it just can't be forgotten. I'm a huge fan of Gale Weathers. She's actually my favorite character in Scream. And I felt like number 3 and also number 4 is where she really had a chance to shine. Scream 3 follows Sydney and her friends who visit the set of Stab 3, which is a film based on their lives. And of course, Ghostface returns. Say what you want about this film. I know it's not everyone's favorite, but it's one of mine, and I feel like Courtney Cox just really shines in it, and as I said, she's my favorite character. But my hidden gem for this year couldn't be any different. It's on the opposite side of the scale. It is such a rare and interesting film that I can't believe actually exists. This is Shadow of the Vampire. This one's a trip, starring William Dafoe and John Malkovich. The film is set around the filming of the 1922 classic horror film Nosferatu. In this one, Max Schreck, I hope I said that right, he uses a particular style of acting, which is method, and he decides to take his role as a vampire very seriously. This film is an actual gem, and it's based on the rumor that Max was behaving like this on set of the original film. To me, it's just amazing that this film exists. 2001, this one has to be The Others. Are you surprised? This haunting mystery thriller follows Nicole Kidman, who plays Grace, a woman who lives in her dark mansion with her 2 children who suffer from a rare disease where they cannot be exposed to light. And after several eerie events, the children grow to believe that the home is haunted. I don't know what else to say about this film. It is gloomy, it is gothic, and I don't want to give away anything more because it's fantastic. My underrated gem from this year is one that I've mentioned a couple of times on this channel. In fact, I think I have a review of it, but it's so important and I feel like not enough people watch it. It is The Happiness of Katakouris. This Japanese comedy horror fantasy is a thrilling musical ride. Yes, you heard me, musical. Likely the strangest musical you have and will ever see. The film follows a family who have just opened a bed and breakfast, but soon things start to spiral when their guests aren't feeling too well. This is a weird and thrilling movie that won't leave your head. In fact, it might melt your brain just a little bit, but in the best way. This was the easiest choice for me on this list, easiest, because this is in my top 10 horror movies of all time. I don't think I'll ever do that list because I cannot decide what stays in there, but this one has a solid place, and this is The Ring. This is the American remake of Ringu, and the movie follows Rachel, a journalist who is chasing a story about a deadly rumor of a videotape that threatens to kill whoever watches it in 7 days. I love everything about this film. It's cold, it's dreary, it's terrifying, and I love Naomi Watts' portrayal of Rachel. I think it's such an important and key role, and to be honest, it really changed what I think about characters and how they flesh them out. I love how she was complicated and raw. You guys have heard me say this before, time and time again. I love Rachel. I love this movie. The next one also wasn't a hard hidden gem for me because May is my life. I love this movie. If you have not seen May, you are missing out because this creep factor is off the charts. This is a criminally underrated horror movie with an amazing performance by Angela Bettis. Directed by Lucky McKee, the film follows a socially awkward veterinary assistant who is navigating through the world with an obsession of a boy and her best friend who is a doll that lives in a box. So what happens when she slips? Okay, this one was hard for me. I've done 2 again. I don't care. I'll cheat. I think you guys were okay with it last time. I had to choose these 2 because they're so different, but they're just as important to me. The most obvious one is Final Destination 2. This is actually my favorite one of the franchise because I think it has the most creative and best kills. You know, the one that starts with the log scene and scarred us all, and now we switch lanes. If you're unaware of Final Destination, the film follows a person who has a premonition about an accident and warns others. In turn, they save their lives. But your death day cannot be so easily changed, and fate has a way of collecting. I also had to mention Dreamcatcher. I know it's not a full-blown horror movie, but it's Stephen King and it definitely has some of those themes, so it belongs on this list. This sci-fi drama horror-ish movie is a typical Stephen King setup following a group of misfits and how their unlikely friendship grew over time. But now they are all grown up and a reunion brings a stranger into their lives, threatening to destroy everything. My underrated gem of this year is extreme horror gore fest High Tension. Brought to you by French horror director Alexandre Aja, whose work includes The Hills Have Eyes remake, Piranha 3D, Horns, Mirrors, and Crawl. This extreme French horror is a cat and mouse game pushed to the limit. The film follows 2 best friends who go to a secluded farmhouse for the weekend, only to be subjected to an endless night of horror. Are you a fan of extreme horror and you haven't heard of this film? This one is definitely for you. It's disturbing and I don't really want to give away too much, but there's more to the story. 2004, this is another easy one for me. Being an Australian, I'm gonna pick Saw. I would pick Saw regardless. I think that this movie changed horror. Even though the torture porn category of horror was a thing, I felt like this one really brought it to light and cemented what that actually meant, which is pretty gross. But for me, the final scene in this movie just meant so much to me. I actually did a video on it, which is That Scene. That Scene is a series I do where I focus on one scene in a horror movie. It includes a complete breakdown on the scene and why it changed the film. Anyway, I'll link that one up there. Directed by James Wan and created by Wan and Lee Wanell, in this one, 2 strangers wake up in a room where they have to play a psychotic game to survive. Overall, the best takeaway from Saw is the mix of gore and psychological thrills, which I mean, it's been done before, I think of like 7 and things like that, but not to this kind of extent where it's extreme one side and extreme the other. And having those 2 senses combined where your brain is racing trying to figure out the puzzle or what's going on while you're seeing something so terrifying is really interesting, and it's something that you just don't forget. My underrated gem is 3 Extremes, without a doubt. If you have not seen this film, write it down right now. If you have a pen and paper, write down 3 Extremes. You will thank me later or you'll hate me because it's so utterly disturbing. 3 Extremes is an anthology horror movie made up of, well, 3 extreme stories. These are all by different influential Asian directors, and Dumplings is by far my favorite story in this film, and it went on to be adapted into its own feature after this film. I'm sure a lot of you guys know about 3 Extremes, but if you've missed it, write it down. We're almost there, guys. At 2005, what would be my favorite horror movie from this year? It's The Descent, of course. This is Neil Marshall's action horror thriller about a group of women who go on a caving expedition, which ends in them fighting for their lives. I've considered making a video love letter about this film because I just love it so much. It's genuinely creepy as hell, disturbing, and some of the scenes and situations are just so memorable. I love this film. Please check it out if you haven't. And an underrated gem, which actually I think most of you guys probably haven't seen, is The Booth. I believe I spoke about this one for a 31 Days of Horror. This Japanese artsy ghost story is about a haunted booth that a call-in radio show must temporarily broadcast from. I don't want to give away too much, but it comes together in such a unique way, and I think it's definitely worth your time. 2006 goes to one of my favorite South Korean horror films, which is The Host. This movie does not get enough praise in my opinion. It's directed by South Korean legend Bong Joon-ho. which you may know for his recently critically acclaimed Parasite. The Host is about a monster that emerges from the Han River in Seoul, and the film follows a family's journey to survive. If you're a fan of South Korean horror movies and you haven't seen The Host, you're definitely missing out. Another horror movie that I love and felt like didn't get enough attention is Black Sheep. This time moving to New Zealand, a horror comedy sci-fi. And as you might expect from the title, it's about a breakout of bloodthirsty killing sheep terrorizing a farm in New Zealand. It's cheesy, it's fun, and as a horror fan, when you see the practical effects of these sheep, you'll just fall in love. 2007, you have no idea how many times I went back and forth between these two films. They're so different, completely different sides of the scale, and it really shows how different my love of horror can be. Some days I'll like watching really cheesy stuff, and the next day I want to watch something really deep and dark, and I just could not make this list without mentioning the first film, which is Paranormal Activity, because I'm uncultured swine. This is one you'll either hate or love. It's a found footage film that follows a couple who are trying to capture the bizarre energy in their home on camera. I personally love this one and the second film. I can't tell you how many times I've watched them. I love these films. It's like movie magic to me, but let's move on because I know so many of you are cringing right now. The second film I have to mention is The Orphanage, and if you haven't seen this, please watch it. It is a hard watch and it is very tragic, but it will not leave you. This Spanish drama horror mystery is about a woman who moves into an old orphanage where her son starts a friendship with an imaginary friend. I'm not going to say too much more, but this film left me completely speechless. Please, if you like foreign horror, watch this one. My underrated gem for this year has to be Frontiers. I hope I'm saying that right. I never know how to say this title. This is a brutal French horror film about a gang of thieves who take shelter in an inn, only to be tortured by Nazi war criminals. This film is the actual definition of extreme horror. The tagline for this film is, "What are your boundaries?" It's not one for the faint of heart, and it has to be seen to be believed. 2008. If I asked you, 2008, what's your favorite horror movie from 2008? I think maybe 60% of us, I would say, which is pretty high, would have the same answer, and that is the original Martyrs. This film is another one that has to be on my top 10 horror films of all time. This French-Canadian horror film takes us on a journey that awakens the mind while disturbing the senses. We follow a woman's quest for revenge against the people who abused her as a child, but the truth is so much more unsettling. As per the last one, this is one of the most disturbing films I've ever seen in my life. There's a scene in the bathroom and it scarred me so bad. It was terrifying. As this list goes on, I just feel like these are all disturbing movies, and the next one is no exception. This is Eden Lake. One of the most scarring films I've ever seen. This horror thriller follows a couple that are terrorized by a group of youths on a romantic weekend away in the wilderness. This film is extremely hard to watch and follows a very simple storyline, but the way it's presented will break you. We made it, guys. It's 2009, the last year in the decade, and my favorite film from this year has to be South Korean gem Thirst. This South Korean journey film follows a priest who is stricken with a strange affliction after a failed medical experiment. I don't want to give away too much, but as I said, it is a journey film, so you follow one character through so many different situations. And I'm surprised a lot of people don't talk about this film. I think it's really clever, and the subject matter it surrounds I'm not usually a fan of, but I love this one. And my underrated gem for the year, I don't know if this is so much underrated because I feel like a lot of people who talk about horror movies online talk about it, but I think a few of you guys still haven't seen it, and it's Orphan. This twisty horror mystery is about a couple who adopts a 9-year-old troubled girl. I know I'm being vague. I don't want to give away too much about this film, and for those who have seen it, you know why. Also, for those who have seen it, did you know that there is a case that is quite similar to what happened in this movie? They don't say they're connected or it's based on that, but it happened around the same time of shooting, which is so strange. But I urge you to look it up. I was actually going to do a video on it because I felt it was so interesting, but the movie isn't really alleged to be based off it. So very interesting stuff. I think you should look it up because it's really disturbing. Hopefully it gave you 1 or 2 movies you haven't seen to watch, or pushed you to watch some movies that maybe you've seen the covers for or you knew about but you weren't too sure about. Hopefully this helped. If you do want me to do the best of the 90s, I will definitely do that for you. I'm a little bit scared about that one, but I'll do it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys very soon. Stay spooky. Bye.